space that we can to the show. And so I just want you to know we all appreciate you, okay, here at the Wisconsin Musky Expo. This is quite the deal. Not only do you have Juice Box, speaking here, but you also got Clayton Spiess.
Word on the street, the Juice Box is beating Boom Sauce, so.
Are you kidding me?
Not kidding.
I just haven't begun.
There's no more Phil's Black Pro in the 7/8.
Oh no.
To be known.
Yeah, well.
Guarantees whooping butt.
Guarantees.
When you all get done with
Guarantees.
When you get done, you need to run to Hunt's Tail, get yourself some Boom Sauce because you want a big fish. That's what's okay. Little Muskies drink juice boxes. They juice boxes. Listen, we have a lot of fun in this business, okay? But listen, these guys don't need introduction. I think you know who. How many of you listen to Muskies on Tap? For those of you that didn't raise your hand, you definitely need to listen to it because it's a great podcast, and they tell the truth, and that's what I love about it so much. I've been on there a few times, and Gus lets us let it rip. He wants nothing but the truth. What's a really bonus today is you got Captain Pornstash here. Oh my God! See, they get it. Listen, in all honesty, I'll tell you what, I fished with Phil before. You want to talk about, he's a jokester, but I'm going to tell you something. He's a hell of a captain. He's really a hell of a captain. They really got their stuff down pat. There's more to fishing Green Bay than people realize, and this guy here, he's got it going on. So I'm just going to let you all start this. Thank you, guys. Okay, have a good time.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rich.
Let's keep the fist and fighting down a little bit, okay? This is just a debate. It's all fun, okay?
Yeah.
Have fun.
Thanks.
Thank you, Rich. You make me blush. I appreciate that. All right, so like Rich said, my name is Phil Snow. I'm going to be the moderator here of the first great debate. I'm honored to be here as your moderator. I'll let these guys introduce themselves in a minute, but I will assure you that the word on the street is that they are both master debaters. Hey! All right, I'll stay on it. That's all right. You guys go ahead and introduce yourself, please, just real quick.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for showing up here today. For now, until you get bored. But my name's Clayton Spiess. I am the owner of Thistle Outdoor Adventures up in Eagle River, Wisconsin. Born and raised in northern Wisconsin. Been fishing for over 30 years and been guiding for about 5 years. And this is the start of my 3rd year full time. And I'm probably one of the more frequent guests on the Muskies on Tap podcast, which sounds like that's very popular in here. So, yeah. Take it away, Gus.
Yeah, I believe we've had you on about 10 times or so. Most frequent guest, I think he's just pretty much a co-host at this point. I'm Gus Mantey, owner of Suggs Fishing Guide Service out of Eagle River, Wisconsin as well, and one of the hosts of the Muskies on Tap podcast. And I've been guiding for 4 years now, and I grew up in the Appleton area, but always going up to Eagle River and been fishing there for 20 years. So that's the home water as well. And tournament angler as well with my brother, and I've done a tournament with Clayton and a few other people as well. And yeah, excited to go through the questions that we have lined up here, and thanks for coming out.
All right, awesome. So did you guys do an intense thumb wrestling to see who's going to go first, or who's taking the first question? All right, Gus is going first. All right, so Gus, first question of the great Musky debate of 2025. Do you use a tiller or a console boat, and why?
Well, for me, it's going to be tiller all day, every day. I grew up using a tiller and mainly on smaller water, so that kind of goes hand in hand with the fishability. I kind of like having the console not in the way, never got to worry. Always can run around the boat if you have a fish that's hooked poorly or you got to walk it or it's a big fish. I've always just loved the fishability of a tiller, and you know, if there was a case I wouldn't go tiller, it's only if I fished really, really big water. But I run an 18.5-foot tiller, and it's been able to withstand up to pretty big winds at Vermilion even, so I'll take it if I can handle that.
Right on. All right, hashtag Tiller Life. Clayton, same question.
Well, contrary to Gus, I actually care about my clients. Full
That's all right if they get wet.
Fiberglass boat. I actually just recently about a year and a half ago, upgraded to a 621 Ranger with a full windshield. And I've been in fiberglass boats pretty much since I've had my own boat. Started with a bass boat, which was fun. The fishability was amazing. Handles, wind, being able to control the boat's great. And just decided that a bass boat wasn't going to work when I started guiding. So I needed a little bit more room and a little more comfort for the people in the boat. But I absolutely love my boat, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. So it's a council.
Fishing Green Bay, like I do, I'm a console man myself. We like to give Kyle Hunsader from Huntsy Tales a hard time because he has a single windshield bubble, and we like to say that we're better friends. We like to have our friends have a windshield too. So, all right, Clayton, we're going to come back to you with the next question here. The next question is, what is the most important piece of electronics in the boat and why? And we're not talking about specific brand. We're talking about like GPS maps, side imaging, 360 live, like a category of electronics.
Yeah, so I would say for where I've grown up in northern Wisconsin and just about anywhere, I would use happens to be a Humminbird, but 360 imaging, and I would get rid of anything and everything just to only have that. It helps me stay on structure better. I can see the structure in front of me before I get to it. I don't run over tips of weeds or rock tips. If there's any kind of indentation in the weed line or any kind of difference in structure, I get to see it and can point it out before I get to it. And I use that with some other electronics to just fish as accurately as I can, make sure that the clients and whoever's in my boat with me has the best chance at a fish. Sometimes we can even see fish with that before we get to them. We can turn the boat sideways and we can all cast at it, as we're working structure. The only time when I might change that would be up on Lake of the Woods or some of those Canadian lakes, and I would completely get lost without my maps. So I would need it then. I don't know how people did it beforehand, because a paper map, I'll still get completely turned around out there. I've tried it.
Yeah, they'd be a little dicey on a paper map up there for sure. All right, Gus, same question.
All right, I've used 360 and I really like that, but I don't have it on my boat. I guess if there was only one thing that I could use the whole time, it would absolutely be side image, for sure. Being able to just see the weed line and the structure. It helps me visualize the spot. But if I really had to narrow it down, like say I already have a lake dialed in, like we'll just say the Eagle River chain, a lake there. I got hundreds to almost like 1,000 waypoints out there. If I could have zero sonar at all. If I just had my GPS maps with my waypoints, I've just detailed that in so well with auto chart and taken my time on that. I would just run straight up the maps only and just go waypoint to waypoint, because there's waypoints I have in there that are within my first 50 of about the 5,000 I put in the last couple of years, and they've held true every single year that fish just sit in the same spot. So I've found the importance of just the GPS maps. If it was a lake I know, that's all I'd use.
All right, perfect. Next question. Do you guys like to bump or run on the momentary setting of your trolling motor, or do you keep it on constant and just steer? We'll start with Clayton.
Christ. I get to start again?
Oh, sorry.
Oh. You go.
I'll go.
You go.
Okay. So the bump is interesting. I actually never even knew about that until fishing with these guys, basically. I would just use my trolling motor on constant, the boat we had growing up, it never had spot lock or autopilot or anything, so it was just kind of run with the wind or just drift down the wind. But now I utilize constant heavily, because I do have an aluminum boat, so it does get tossed around a little bit more by the wind, so I always point my boat as best as I can upwind in the spots, and I just put it on constant, with like a Minn Kota Tarova. You hit the autopilot button, and it kind of, automatically will go back and forth to keep you on the line you had, and then I'll just control left and right from there and keep it, and then go back and forth on the 1 through 10 dial for the speed, and that's kind of how I like to run the trolling motor. I've bumped before, but it's only if it's flat calm. I don't mind having the trolling motor on the whole time. I know that spooks some people out if it spooks the fish, but I don't know if it does exactly.
All right, Clayton, same question.
Yeah, and I know this is a debate, but I have to agree that Gus has got his automatic dialed in. He is very good with it, and I've grown up and I have always just done bump, and I'll continue to do it. absolutely prefer it over anything else. I feel like I can control the speed of the boat a lot better by bumping, although you do have to balance a lot more, but it's come down to time on the water, time on the foot pedal, and I pretty much do it without ever even looking down at the foot pedal anymore. I can just move my foot over, bump on it, let it off. I try and make sure it's off if there's ever a fish coming in, and honestly, I'll turn it off when people bring their baits to the boat every time, just to make sure that it spooks a fish, but I don't know necessarily that it does. In some facts, sometimes I've seen fish swim right up to that trolling motor while it was running, so it's a horse apiece, but I bump.
Clayton, do you think if the trolling motor is going and then you stop it, like the fish knows that the trolling motor is on and then you stop it, do you think the change maybe spooks them? Because I've always thought if it's off, never turn it back on if you got one going, or if you have it on, keep it on if you have a fish in the ait.
I think that it might spook some fish. It depends on how hot that fish is, honestly. And in one instance, this last year up in Canada, I turned the trolling motor off and let the wind blow me over this point where I saw a fish on the 360. We were casting at it, we weren't getting it to move, and all of a sudden we're on top of it and on top of the weeds, and I was like, crap, I got to turn my trolling motor on and drive away from it. We can't do anything else. I got to go out and reset. So I turned on the trolling motor and started backing the boat up backwards and just did a quick little flip cast out, and the fish came out from underneath the boat and ate. It was a 51. So that fish didn't care.
When they want to eat, they want to eat.
Yeah.
So you heard it here first, folks. R. Kelly and Clayton agree that there's nothing wrong with a little bump and grind. True. All right, coming back to Clayton. I was messed up the order. Clayton, you're going to go first this time. Next question. Best advice for cold fronts during the summer?
Well, I don't know if there's a perfect answer for that. So my first thought when we hit a cold front, and I'm thinking post-storm cold front, that could tend to get kind of tough for fishing. Sometimes there isn't an answer for that, but one of the first things that I go to would be a dive rise. It seems to really work well on cold fronts. Slow the bait down, slow our baits down. I'll start off definitely running the baits that were working prior to that cold front and try and find a reaction of some sort. And if we can't get any reaction, then I abandon it and start going to other things. But we'll start downsizing quite rapidly to a much smaller bait. But definitely a go-to for cold fronts in the summertime for me is dive rise.
All right. Gus, same question?
Yeah, I think I agree on that front. Dive rise would definitely be one of the first I would pick. I guess, summarize it entirely as just I go to pull pause mainly, and specifically a bait that hangs more. So if it's rubber, it's going to be shallow rubber, and if it's going to be a rise bait, typically a slower rise unless you're working the really sloppy weeds. But midsummer, if you're in the peak of the year, which would be up in northern Wisconsin, is basically the second half to late July to about early to mid-August, kind of just that one little 3 to 4 week period, where it's super hot and we haven't quite gotten those cold fronts. I'd probably go deep first. A lot of those fish are going to relate to the deepest weeds. I'm going to check there first and probably rip a crankbait, like a 7.5 inch grandma or a slammer or something like that. And if they're not there, then you go shallow. And one thing that we used last year that worked really well is spinner baits, small spinner baits on deep weed edges first, or slop, like in the 3 to 6 foot of weeds, basically. So I'm just gonna go look really shallow, probably in most of those cold fronts, if deep isn't working.
Yeah, spinner baits are a lot of fun. You can chuck them, you can troll them, you can work them through slop. Definitely fun stuff. All right, Gus, we'll come back to you with the next question. So the question says, say you just launched on a brand new lake, how are you going to break it down, and what's your usage of electronics?
So I guess maybe for the question, probably go with the lake that I don't know anything about. So I got a map and that's it.
Yep.
And when I get on there, it's immediately big motors on. I'm not even thinking about putting the trolling motor in yet. I'm gonna turn on auto chart and I'm gonna pretty much plow. I'm not gonna even troll, because that'll slow me down a little bit. I kind of want to graph it 4 to 6 miles an hour. You can get a still pretty good side image. Trim up if you need to, turn your speed on a little bit more, and everything that looks cool on side image, just start plopping waypoints, 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 and I'd take my time on before I actually start fishing the lake. I know some people just get on, they just want to go right to the first point and just start bomb casting, but I've done that before, and I usually always run up on the spot, and I don't want to run up on the spot. Of course, I'm just driving over it if I'm pre-fishing it like that, but typically the fish don't care too much about that, so I'm at least going to take an hour to hour and a half of just driving around and graphing.
Right on, Clayton, same question.
So, if I could possibly do any kind of recon before even getting to the lake, I have the map, right? I can look at the previous weather, if it's a big lake and wind could cause currents in the lake, or if there's neck downs and certain spots where maybe waves might have been pushing bait into a certain area. I'm gonna kind of check all that stuff out. When you look at a lake and it's new, I think one key thing would be to look at some of the furthest most parts of the lake that stick into the center of it, or certain spots that, you know, where will kind of draw fish to a certain area where bait fish might get blown through. And so at that point, judging based on wind and weather, what it has been prior to me getting on the water, then I'll go and I'll graph out those key areas, and if I find some stuff that I like I said, I like to start fishing right away, so I'll probably check it out and throw some casts before I go and graph the rest of the lake. But I'll use my side imaging to graph very similar. I don't typically do the auto charting, although after watching Gus do it, I do think that's very crucial. If you have the opportunity to auto chart, definitely make use of that, because a lot of maps aren't really good, even though the chips are good nowadays. I don't myself usually do it, but it's something that I probably should look into.
All right, excellent. Clayton, coming back to you right away. This is a good question. I like this one, and it's one that I'll definitely personally judge on the answers to, so just throwing that out there. What are you wearing on your feet in the boat?
I like the thong sandals, and I'm very proud of my tan. Honestly. Oh, on my feet. Oh,
You see that thong?
jeez, I totally misread that question.
On your feet.
On my
Yes,
feet.
On your feet.
Yeah.
Crocs have got to be about the most comfortable thing I've ever worn on my feet, but I won't wear them in the boat because I can't stand that leopard tan. I'm sorry, Bill, you can judge me all you want.
I am.
I do love Hey Dudes, those work pretty well, but yeah, I'm sticking to my first answer, honestly.
Yeah. Hey dudes for me too. I have a whole plethora. I probably go with the non-thong sandals more than him. I like the different tan line. You know, I don't want that little slit. No. And or bare feet, a little dangerous, but sometimes I do that. Or I have some nice tennis shoes for a good arch if I'm really feeling it.
Arch.
Yeah, I've been keeping up on the Thistle Do Outdoors, and I see Jamie. Love the guy to death, just rocking the bare feet in the boat. To me, that's a bold move.
That's wild.
I'm not about that life, but
It's a good thing he's got cat-like reflexes.
yeah. And monster feet. I don't think a hook could even get in there, but we'll move on. That's not the question. We love you, Jamie. All right, next question. For tournament pre-fishing, do you pull out on fish in the 8 or try and catch them, and why?
Me? You.
Pulling out. So definitely. Well, there's one. My brother and I, we've found success with, taking baits out of the water and fishing the figure 8. There was even an instance where we're pretty positive we caught a fish on Madison tournament day 1 of 2023, where I raised about a low 40s, 41, 42, and I think in the tournament it ended up being 41 and a half, where I just yanked it out. There was like 7 boats around us on 2 days before the tournament, plopped the waypoint down, and we caught it during the tournament on, the tube, just casting the same exact direction. So I saw a benefit. I don't think in the future we're gonna take the bait out on fish like 3 days before a tournament, but the day before, most likely, if it's hot and it's like a 50, we're gonna catch it. We're gonna try and catch it. I can't say no to that. But if it's like a nice little tournament legal 36, yeah, yanking it.
So I guess in summary, pulling out most of the time. Fair enough. Clayton, same question.
No comment.
I like to feed them the goods. When Nick and I decided to do tournaments back in the day, we kind of decided that we love catching fish, and we don't really, I mean, obviously we want to do well in the tournaments, but we don't really care so much if we're burning fish, because who knows what the pattern's going to be that next day, and if the boat behind us pre-fishing is going to catch that fish. What I really want to do is I really want to see how these fish, if they do make it into the figure eight, I'm going to figure eight it for a while. I want to see how the fish reacts to a figure eight, to an oval, hoping that maybe by stinging that fish and catching it, which I love catching fish, will give me some sort of information that'll help me later on with the tournament. So typically, all the way up until the day before the tournament, we'll catch them. We have done well pre-fishing to the point where we can start yanking out on them, but almost every time we'll try and catch that fish because we just love catching fish.
I do remember one piece of that fish I described in Madison. I forgot that I didn't just take the bait out of the water. I remember vividly the first corner, and Max looked back when I said something that I had one coming in. The fish actually inhaled the entire bait, and I just sat there and it spit it out. I don't know how I had that composure, but that was interesting.
That was dumb.
It was, no, we got a fish. No,
You got that fish.
we
Yeah,
got that
so
fish.
It worked.
It worked out,
That
but
makes me mad.
typically dumb.
All right, Clayton, coming right back to you here. Next question, staying on the tournament topic. For tournament strategy, do you hunker down on fewer spots or do you run and gun?
Typically, we have been known to run and gun on a lot of the tournaments that we do, although I gotta admit that the tournaments that we do better on is when we find a good pot of fish and we stick on them. Sometimes that's not always an option, so I think every tournament kind of varies. It depends on how we do pre-fishing and if we can actually find enough fish to where we feel good about staying on a couple spots. A lot of times though, we like to fish hard and fast in a tournament and just keep bouncing around, but it has definitely bit us in the tail before. I wouldn't necessarily say that's always the best case.
All right, Gus, same question.
Pretty much since my brother and I have been tournaments, we've been known to just hunker down because pretty much every tournament that we've gone to has been brand new bodies of water. So in general, we're not getting a lot of spots in the 2 or 3 days pre-fishing. Even if there's a spot we like and we don't raise any, it's not going to be our top priority of going to that spot. We want to go to spots where we mark fish, maybe catch, or raise the fish, and then we're going to hunker down in those spots. I think it was 2 years ago in Kentucky, I fished maybe overall 4 or 5 spots, but for the last, I don't know how many was it 15 hours of tournament? For the last 13 of it, I was in one spot. So, and it was pretty much just like a little, I don't know, football field at best of an area, maybe smaller. And the bait was there and the fish were there, so I just figured to hunker down. And we have tried running and gunning once at last year's championship on the Eagle River chain, and I noticed that it did not do us very well. We just were bouncing too many spots and trying to find too many fish when we should have just hunkered down into the spots that we knew there were fish, because more than likely they're going to eat at some point and somebody else is going to catch them if you're not, on that spot. So hunkering down for sure.
All right, Gus, coming right back to you then. Next question, you can only use 3 baits for a tournament. You don't know what lake or time of year. What are you taking?
Time of year. One of them for sure is going to be a Red October tube, ninja size, with a blade off the back, because they can always take it off or whatnot. That's the most versatile rubber bait that can still be straight retrieved in the figure eight and whatnot and convert fish. Probably the mid-depth for sure. That's one of them. 10-inch weighted wood Suic has always been a confidence bait of mine. And I know you said time of year, it could be any time, but I gotta go blades. I was thinking of another rubber, because typically I'm always a pull pause guy, but I'll just toss in the lure. I know my brother would throw a lot, and it would just be basic homemade double eights with bucktail hair, small, like very, very small hair, where basically the blades are bigger than the bucktail hair on it. Just put 2 hooks on it, and she's ready to go for tournaments.
What color?
Brown.
Ooh, all right.
Brown and silver.
Sassy. All right, Clayton, same question.
I got to start with, I'm going to agree with the 10-inch or the Red October tube in the Ninja size with the blade on the back. I would say if I had to pick one color, it would be black with nickel blade on the back, and probably like a smaller Colorado or something if you really want to be specific. 100% money cast back bait, if nothing else. That's probably going to be my throwback bait just about any time, anywhere. And then you got to think about it, but I know for sure we'd have to run a bucktail. And since Hunsy Tails has come out and the bangers, we've been trying to keep it quiet until he's like, I'd love to sell some of these someday. But bangers have been absolutely key for us everywhere, and I would go with an 8-9.
In the juice box?
Yes.
I
already
Just kidding,
answered it
sorry to
for him.
interrupt.
Negative Ghost Rider.
Carry on, sorry.
No.
I would have to say somewhat of a walleye or a Goldilocks pattern for that. So that's 2 baits. And then the third one, I'm really like torn. I would like to say a dive rise, but in all honesty, we don't really throw that many dive rise in tournaments. I'm gonna go with actually a sledgehammer, 8-inch, 9-inch, whatever it is.
It's like 8, yeah.
Yeah, Hammer Customs, another one of our buddies. Well, yeah, Nick, my tournament partner, he makes this bait. And since we've started using that, that's triggering fish everywhere too, getting at least moving fish and locating them in it. If nothing else, when nothing else is working, we can put that on anytime and at least find fish. And then we might need something else to catch them. Sometimes we get fish on it too, but that's a very good locator fish bait.
All right, excellent. Clayton, coming right back to you again. Next question. You have 1 rod and reel to use. What would you get?
Yeah, I think we got this question together for anybody that's looking to get into musky fishing and has one set up to buy. That's all they can get. And it seems like the trend is to go longer and longer and longer and longer. And so it's a tough question because I think you should pick that based on how tall you are. But for, let's call the average angler, I'm gonna say go with, if you can customize it to whatever, I would say a 9'6" heavy with Tranks 400 on it. High gear.
High gear. All right. Gus, same question.
I think we're pretty much in full agreement on this debate question. Definitely, the Tranks 400 high gear is the most used reel in my boat for ripping rubber, pulling blades to even medium-sized blades, slow rolling top waters, and exactly what he said. Pretty much go based on your height and your boat. You got to remember what boat you have because there's fiberglass boats that sit way up high, and you could be 6'4". You probably want a 10-footer, or you could be like me, short on an aluminum boat, nice and close to the water. I like my 9-footers. So
That's a good call. If you can't reach the water, it makes it tough to do a good figuring.
Yep.
All right, Gus, coming back to you again. Here's another heavy judgment coming in from your moderator on your answer to this question.
Oh boy.
What are your go-to boat snacks?
Immediately always grabbing a bag of Gardettos. I don't know why, I just always have gravitated towards those. A white monster, 16 ounce. That is a little specific, but and probably last night's dinner.
All right.
Yeah.
All right, probably one of the first things I grab for tournaments, especially. I got to think about this. So like we would grab a bag of like Tex-Mex trail mix of some sort, or some sort of like a fruit nut mix to go with. That always goes really well and it's fast and you can eat on the fly. Beverage would be, I'm gonna kill myself, but it's gonna be a Celsius probably of various flavors. High octane, keeps me going. The crash at the end, well, as long as I can get through the tournament, I'm all right. Definitely, if I'm get lucky, I'm gonna get some venison sausage, sausage sticks, money.
For sure.
I forgot about the Uncrustables.
I was gonna say, you guys are very grown up compared to my boat snacks. I eat like a toddler in the boat. I got Uncrustables, I got the little applesauce packets. Anything I have, if I'm trolling, I gotta be able to chuck it and then go grab a rod. So
I'm throwing my brother under the bus here, but if you look at my Facebook profile and zoom in on my brother, he's just staring down a Jimmy Dean microwave frozen sandwich at like 6:45 in the morning in Kentucky.
There is multiple times in Green Bay too where I've gotten done with an 8-hour guide trip and it's the middle of the afternoon and I text out to my buddies. I say, anybody who brings hot food and a box of beer to the boat ramp, we can fish till dark. So every now and then I get a Big Mac and a couple of bush lattes. That makes for a nice evening. But all right, moving right along here. Gus, coming back to you. What is your favorite structure to fish?
You know, I think if we're just talking northern Wisconsin, some of my favorite structure is about the most basic giant weed bay that most people just fish the outer edge, call it good, maybe catch a fish, maybe see a fish. And I'm the one that's going to get right up in there. I'm going to get up in the, inside weed edges. This is where just using your eyes or side image, really comes in handy. And waypoints. If previous years, those weed pockets are going to show up typically year after year. And I'm just going to go in zigzags and back and forth, casting in, casting out. I don't know why, but I really just like combing an entire weed bay. Running a nice weed edge break line is definitely great and typical of me, but I'm usually the one where you're looking at that boat and you're like, what the hell is that guy doing? Why is he up there? So, shallow weed bays.
Right on. Clayton, same question.
My favorite structure would be when I get to go not in northern Wisconsin and fish submerged rock humps, rock piles, even rock structures that come out of the water like Canada or Shield Lakes, northern Minnesota. I absolutely love doing that, and maybe that's because we don't have a whole lot of it back at home. I mean, there's some here and there, but our fishing generally is dominated with weed edges and weed bays. And for northern Wisconsin, I like to stick more to the weed edges and points of that hold weeds and stuff like that. Islands that have weeds around them, those would be some of my favorite structures in northern Wisconsin.
All right, excellent. Yeah, I've only been to Lake of the Woods once, but that rock stuff is really fun. I read in the Musky magazine to throw your crankbaits and hit them against the rocks for years, and it never worked until I got to Canada. The first rock hump we found, and we were catching them like crazy.
That's a thing up there.
It's awesome. Yeah, it's pretty fun. All right, Clayton, coming right back to you. Next question. Board versus down rod for trolling. So I'm assuming you only have one option here. You're not on Green Bay. You're running 15 rods with your best buddies on the boat. You got one option, board or down rod.
Down rod, probably. Although if I'm in ultra clear water, I will actually convert to board rods to get the baits a little bit further away from the boat and keep them higher in the column than just a down rod. But for most of our water, like flowage waters, stained waters, it's all about down rod, short line, trolling, keep the bait fairly high, usually make a little contact maybe, but if I'm fishing bait, I'm keeping the bait high in that bait.
Yeah, I was going to say short line is obviously an option here as well. So down rod would be rod tip in the water, short line would just be rod tip up but no board. So that's an option as well. Gus, we'll go back to you.
Yeah, I think I'd probably go down rod too. And that's, what you're saying is interesting. If I'm going board rod, it's typically always going to be high up because those are a pain in the butt if you're trying to ram those into something and have to clear a board rod all the time. That would be a pain. But it's always been board rod for me. And even in northern Wisconsin, when you get up to 3, there's many instances in dirty water where if I got 3 people in the boat, I'm running three down rods, just 2 off the side and then one just kind of angled up high in a shallow running crankbait and just chuck it like 100 feet back and call it good. And it's probably only running like 6-7 feet down, and that's worked pretty well for me. But last year I finally saw the power of the board rods in clear water in the late fall. And surprisingly enough, I was not trolling very deep. I was only trying to get the crankbait down 7 or so feet on pretty clear water in late fall last year. And that was just running board rods off the side, and they won by a long shot to the down rods. So typical years, it's down rods, but last year for some reason it was board.
Yeah, Green Bay, where we get to run both, we definitely catch, in my experience, a lot more fish on the boards, but if we do get a bite on the down rod, lots of times it's a big one. There's not a lot of times where that down rod goes off and we're not dealing with a pretty serious fish. So we'll come right back. Next question. What factors go into choosing what body of water to fish on a given day? And the caveat would be guide trip versus fun trip. So which factors for a guide trip and then which factors for a fun trip?
Sure. We can start with, Clayton and I talking about guide trip.
Yeah.
I mean, mainly, since I'm out of the Eagle River area, we got the Eagle River and Three Lakes chain where there's a lot of fish in both of those chains. That's kind of always at the top of the list, especially if it's new anglers or anglers that want to catch fish, or they got, they're just looking for action. That's all they want. That's typically what I'm asking first. That's like a big portion of it of how I'm choosing. Before I even look at weather, I just want to make sure that I know what the client wants. Because I've taken people where I've asked them and they said they didn't care, and then I've taken them on the chain, and then at the end of the day they go, oh, I fished every single one of these spots. I'm like, well, you should have said something. We could have gone somewhere else. But that's definitely the big factor. And then it's the other two that I'm looking at are the previous days on what's been working. Because sometimes lakes can only be so hot for so long, and if it's hit that lull, I'm out and I'm just going to a different lake. And it's a hard game to play up in northern Wisconsin. It really takes a lot of time. My best advice is take notes, basically, and it boils down to is like time of year, when a certain lake gets hot. They've seen a lot of that, kind of happen. I know Clayton would agree, where certain lakes just fire off in June or fire off in August, and taking notes of that for the guide trip.
All right, Clayton. Clayton, same question. Guide trip. Which factors go into choosing your body of water?
Yes, a lot of the same, things that Gus had to say. Definitely, like you said, I'm going to see how experienced the angler is and try and figure out how much time I'm going to need to get the angler dialed in, and if they can handle more of like, boat side maneuvers and figure eight fish, because there's certain bodies of water up there like cloudier, flowages and stuff where we catch a lot of fish boat side. And if I got brand new anglers that have zero experience, I might actually try and find, if I've got something on my list of lakes that's like deep and clear, where I can rely more so on when we're throwing rubber and they can cast and slow retrieve, they can pull nice and slow, they can rip it as hard as they want, and you can actually teach people a lot that haven't done a lot when you're over super deep water fishing bait fish, because there isn't necessarily a right way to do it until you get that bite. And most oftentimes we don't have to worry about boat side strikes. They'll follow to the boat, and a lot of times they leave. That's just the way they are. They're kind of pressured up there. So that kind of goes into factor. I pay attention to the weather and see if we got any fronts, what the weather's going to be like, the wind. Because if I want to go to a big lake and I might have some elderly people that aren't good on their feet, or somebody that might have some hip problems, I might not necessarily want to go to that. I might just want to go to a smaller lake that's going to be a lot more calm, where they can handle standing in the boat, or whatever, making sure that they're comfortable fishing in the boat. And that can be played into like the Eagle River chain. So I spend a lot of time on Eagle River chain, and that's usually my go-to, because we do a lot of leagues out there. We're out there all the time. We're tournament fishing it. Those fish are pressured, but we pretty much stay on top of them, and I got them dialed in just about at any time. So that's a huge confidence thing. And you would think, well, that would be a good spot to take somebody that isn't real experienced or maybe not super good on their feet, but we deal with boat traffic out there, and I've had people crash down from, other boat waves even, which becomes kind of an issue out there. So that might not even necessarily be the best option for people at that time. So we'll go to like a quiet little lake, start there, and then, the small lakes are kind of nice because you can, decide what's going to happen pretty quick out there and then make a decision from there.
Yeah, I kind of forgot to mention about like if it's a midweek or the weekend, because midweek it's very easy to kind of just go wherever, but the weekend, that's when I probably will stay away from like chains and places that are going to be super busy, and go off to the one-off lakes that are sub 500 acres or so.
Yeah, that's one thing I envy you guys, and I don't, being a guy from the Bay. Like, the idea that you have so many options is really cool, but also like when you're hot, and when you're not, you're not. Like I would have such a hard time being like, all right, well, if we got skunked one day, going to the next day, that'd be really tough for me for sure. But on the bay, we have very limited options, and for a guy with a mind like mine, that's pretty good. We just gotta keep beating that same drum and hope something happens. But yeah, communication with your customers obviously is huge too. That really knowing what the customer wants is a big thing. So. Gus, we'll come back to you. Same question, what factors go into choosing a body of water on a given day for a fun trip, for a non-guided, non-tournament, just fun fishing?
Non-tournament, yeah. So that's probably going to be a solo adventure, an adventure with friends or my brother or dad and whatnot. And pretty much that, I've kind of made a pact with myself that since, I'm guiding all the time and a lot of times going to similar lakes when guiding and kind of beating up on certain fish, that when I'm fun fishing, I will not touch those fish, whatnot. I think that's kind of, dumb if you do just on your off day, go literally fish where you just fished with clients the day before that you might take the next day, that all you're doing is just pressuring them with your own baits. I think I've talked about this in some seminars where sometimes the pressure on that lake is actually yourself. It's not some other people. You're getting mad like, why aren't there fish showing up in this one spot I've been fishing 30 days straight? It's probably you. So when I'm going out on my own, I am pretty much going to a brand new lake every single time. My goal is up north is to learn pretty much every single lake in the 4 or 5 counties up there eventually, and catch at least one fish in all of them, whether or not, even if a lake is going to be guidable, because there's a lot of lakes up there with such low density that it just doesn't even make sense to guide unless somebody wants to, or they're asking for the specific lake. But I'm always trying to find that next new bite, because one other thing that I have noticed in the first few years guiding, when I was talking about that lake skirt hot and cold, that you might find that next lake that's hot. There's a few years ago I found I shouldn't say found, it was a very popular lake anyways, but I noticed that it was on fire no matter how many boats were out there, and it was just a great lake to go to for about a month and a half straight or so. And it didn't even matter the weather, and fish were just showing up. You could, people were catching, raising fish, losing fish, and it just had a lot of confidence. But solo, going somewhere else all the time.
Yeah, the self-pressure thing makes you think of the guy that sits there and catches big bluegills off his dock for 10 years in a row and then complains that there's no more gills around. You can bite yourself if you fish the same stuff over and over. Clayton, same question. Going out on a fun trip, non-tournament, non-guide trip, what are you looking for?
I think probably would be my favorite thing to do would be to go to a lake that I know has maybe fewer fish but much larger fish, and go for a trophy. And I mean, not that you can't get one on some of these other lakes that I would guide on or whatever, but the ultra low density. If one other situation might be if I might have ran out of a pattern, I'll probably go scout some lakes to try and figure out a pattern for my next upcoming trips, and just keep finding the next bite that way. I do love it when Gus and I both have a day off and we can go explore new water. I typically won't go by myself and do it very often. Every once in a while, I kind of wish that I would maybe a little bit more, but I spend a lot more time fishing some stuff that I have fished over the years that I know where there's some absolute giants in, and maybe try and get a chance at that giant.
Right on. All right, next question. We're kind of winding down with our pre-planned questions here. We got 2 left. Clayton, will come right back to you. Are you more likely to switch bodies of water on a tough day of fishing, or stay and grind out a bite?
I will probably most likely be up to staying and grinding out a bite. If I can maybe hopefully foresee a tough bite coming, I'm going to go to maybe the E River chain or a chain of lakes, 3 lakes chain or something where there's a ton of fish, and then try and at least locate the fish and then wait for a certain moon phase or something to go back and get those fish. One case scenario where I would leave the lake is if I'm on that lake and I have a full day or a day and an ultra long day or something with some clients, and we can't even move a fish on that body of water after a few hours. We'll definitely I'll talk to them and be like, hey, this time that's going to take us to move, it might take a little bit out of our day, but I really think that we got a chance if we go and try a completely different type of body of water, and sometimes that's all it takes to catch a fish. But typically, I'll hunker down and I'll beat it up until we get that bite.
All right, excellent. Gus, same question. Are you switching bodies of water, or are you gonna stay and grind out a bite?
At this point, probably gonna switch bodies of water more times than not now. I mean, it definitely factors into how many fish we're raising, or if we're even getting them to bite, or at least try and bite in the 8 or something like that. I mean, a few things that I'm looking for in a lake, like if I think it's off or I do want to switch, is say we're starting at 8 in the morning and there's like a moon phase at 9, and that ends at, you know, either 10 or 11, depending if it's a, you know, minor or major. And in that, there's going to be some weather patterns like a wind pickup or a wind shift probably. If that little 2 to 3 hour window doesn't work out, for sure going to switch. You know, if we're not raising any fish. I mean, another thing is if you're not even side imaging a fish, or if you're working a weed edge and all you can do is side image fish on the side you're not casting, on the outer side, those, and you're casting at them and they're not moving, then it's like, I'm out of here. You know, that's when I'm gonna absolutely switch. And that's typically on a full day guide trip or a day, you know, you have a lot of time. The really tough part is half day trips. You know, that's you kind of just gotta grind it out, honestly, and just get a fish. It is what it is, you know. I think sometimes it's a good change of scenery. You know, you don't always get people that can fish 10 hours straight, so just hopping in the car and going to the next lake is sometimes, you know, good for visuals just as much as if they've been using the same bait for 5 hours, even though if I tell them it works, just switch baits just to, you know, get something new to look at.
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes you can tell you guys need a break. I've done it. I mean, you guys have fished me way enough. Like, there's only a handful of spots in the summer that are going to be good. I say, all right, guys, put the rods down. We're going to go for a ride. And I literally just take a big lap, drive fast, get up some air, and come back to the exact same weed bed and say, all right, new spot. Let's start over, because you got to keep the morale up. You gotta just really, you know, if you can tell when people start to lose it, and you got to just try to do what you can for them.
We actually, not to interrupt you, but we have it's nice, you know, some of these chains up there have a couple bars at them too.
Ooh, yeah.
It's nice.
Sometimes we need to just go in there and have a little cocktail and kind of maybe
Yeah.
some lunch or whatever, and just kind of chat for a while, and then head to the other side of the chain or something to switch
Yeah, when
around.
Kyle and I went to Vermilion, we definitely found ourselves at the Vermilion Club. There was a point where my buddy and I told Kyle, if you don't take us back somewhere with AC, we're just going to be done. We had to go stop at the Vermilion Club, grab a pizza, grab a cocktail. That really brings the morale up too. So
Just need a reset once in a
yeah, right. Brand new day when you get back. Jumping in the water, also a good idea too. I've done that when it's really hot.
Yeah.
Not a
we've
guide
seen that
trip.
video.
Yeah, well, not my proudest moment, but it feels great. All right, last question that we've got pre-planned here. Speaking of morale, speaking of vibes and the attitude in the boat, do you listen to music in the boat? And if so, what are your go-to fishing jams?
I actually really don't listen to music in the boat. I know a lot of people do, and I don't know. I like being out in nature and just listening to nature and whatnot and talking and the loons. Yeah. So I don't know. I guess
Listen to jet skis and
I
pontoon
might be.
boats.
Yeah.
Whatever the wakeboard
yeah,
guys got
definitely.
going.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So I might be honestly the minority in that case, not listening to much music. But if I am listening, it's gonna be, I don't know. It's either gonna be classic rock, bluegrass, or 90s, 2000s hip hop.
Solid choice. Clayton,
Yeah.
same question.
Yeah, so I guess I always check and see if the clients or whoever's in my boat wants to listen to music. I prefer listening to music, and I think it helps catch fish. I think the fish are drawn to it.
Mm-hmm.
They just think that we're some party boat out there, you know, on Eagle Chain. We're not
Preach.
even fishermen
Preach.
anymore.
Yeah.
So I gotta be honest, you know, that EDM and, you know, that 90s hip hop and stuff. Yeah, not only are we like ripping rubber a little bit better, you know, and you know, sometimes
To
that
the
cadence is, it's a deal, it's a thing, guys. Like seriously, sometimes you need that upbeat music to get those fish to eat.
Yeah, I mean, and my problem too is if I'm in the boat, and I same thing, if the clients are, you know, not wanting to listen to music, that's fine, but my brain, I'm not diagnosed with anything, but my brain's playing the last song I heard anyway, so like if there's not something that in the background, I'm just gonna start singing and be like, what the hell, like, sorry, that was the last song I heard in the truck, I don't know, but I apologize.
Nick loves to sing in the boat too, so I have to keep music going. Just sometimes.
I want Thistle to go. I mean, you had some, but I just want a full video, like an extended cut of just
we're working on an album. It's it's in the works. It could take a little bit, but if you could just remember some of the lyrics, and I got.
That's not important.
I got to set those videos. Depending on how good it is, I might just shut the door of the boat so I don't hear him as much. I pretend that there's a door closed. And
yeah, perfect. Sure. All right, so that is going to take us to the end of our pre-planned questions. Do you know what time the next guy starts? Or is there
6.
6?
So
All
we
right.
got a little time.
Yeah, let's open it up. Does anybody have any questions from the crowd that they'd like to ask our debaters here? There we go. Oh, come on. You got shy. Anybody?
Right there?
Yeah?
ICP on the 3 legs chain.
ICP on the 3 legs chain says.
That's the ticket.
Insane Clown Posse.
I'm gonna take some notes.
Yeah, write that down.
Clickety clack. Duly noted.
All right. Anybody else? Sure.
How often, I don't know, like 1 out of every how many days would you just say you just get completely skunked? Like how many bad days would you say you have in a summer?
Sure. So the question was for anybody who couldn't hear without the microphone, how many days, how often does it happen where you just get skunked? Obviously, Greg Thomas talks about that, being scared of the skunk. It does happen. Everybody hates it, but how often does it happen for you guys?
So what do you consider? Maybe like our views of a complete skunk are different.
Yeah.
Not seeing any fish moving.
Oh,
Wow.
No action,
that's-
not seeing a fish.
That's actually fairly rare. I don't know.
Very rare.
Yeah.
Call that a
that's
half-day
rare.
green beach.
There might be.
On a half day, maybe like a tough. I would say it's most common. It could happen like on a half day if you have a terrible cold front in like June. Is probably the most common time frame where you might not see a fish. And I've also seen late summer too when the fish. If you're on a dirty lake where they're not moving a lot, that's another time where maybe you don't see it. Only on like a half day. Typically, I'd say on a full day, I've always at minimum raised or gotten fish to go in the 8.
There have been a couple days like that, where the weather's not right, and we still almost every time we'll see fish on electronics, and I don't mean by like driving around and scoping. I use a combination of all the electronics that I can in my boat to fish structure, and we will almost always have a fish to the boat. Late follow, lazy, low follow, we never actually get to see it. Unfortunately, a lot of times clients don't bring good sunglasses, so they don't get to see the fish. But I can kind of point it out. I have enough screens up in the front of the boat and stuff that my clients, I can kind of be like, hey, look at that. Like, you just had a follow, and they're like, wow, that's pretty cool. So it can kind of, a trip like that can maybe end up turning into a little bit of a learning on electronics and stuff, and then they think that's cool, and so we can kind of talk a little bit more about that. Try and keep it educational on those tough days, regardless of what's happening.
All right. Any other questions from the crowd? Otherwise, here we go.
What population of people do you like best on your board? Which ones do you feel drawn to? Do you like kids? Do you like newer people? Do you like experienced people? Which ones do you have?
Sure.
No, yeah, you kind
So
of
I'll repeat it a little bit for the people who couldn't hear. The question is, what's your favorite kind of clients, basically, as far as like kids, older people, couples, whatever. What's your favorite kind of client to take out fishing on a guide trip?
I would probably say the kid just getting into it, the happy-go-lucky kid that I've had a few where I'm not even sure how much they fish. They actually just stared into my bait tackle box the whole time and just picked up every single, like you just let them go, and at the end of the day you reorganize, but it's pretty much however many hours it is of them just picking up baits and dropping them in a different spot, or just dropping them on the ground and then just tossing the bait for 2 casts and then coming right back and then picking a different one, and then after 3 bait switches they'll come up to me, which one should I throw? And I'm like, well, maybe the one that I told you to throw right away, but how about this one? This one looks kind of cool. So probably kids. It gives me joy seeing that.
Sure.
Much excitement in the younger generation.
Yeah, absolutely. Clayton, same question.
Yeah, fairly similar answer. I'd have to say I absolutely love taking kids out, and their energy level and anything that happens, like if we do have any positive action at all, whether it's follows, if they get to see a fish, just being able to throw some of the most colorful baits in my box, whether they know how to work it or not. But seeing anybody really catch their first fish or have their first boat side encounter, there's nothing that can top that, honestly. I mean, we have a great time when I got a group of guys and girls that really know how to fish, and they do well, and it makes my job easy, but I embrace the challenge and love to teach people how to fish. It's so much fun.
Absolutely, yeah. And myself, the same deal. It's like, there's nothing more fun than having somebody catch their first muskie, their biggest muskie, anything like that. And then I've even had it, you kind of get in the mindset, you're fishing and maybe somebody catches a big pike. And, especially if you're trolling, you're like, oh, it's coming in. Oh, it's a pike. And then, you kind of ask the guy, oh, do you want a picture? And the guy's looking at you like, dude, that's the biggest fish I've ever seen. Like, yeah, I want a picture. So it's like, it's just fun to get people that are fired up. I definitely have the same attitude there for sure. Does anybody else have a question? All right, go ahead.
Do you guys fish much after the sun goes down? Like 8, 9, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, midnight? Do you chase that bite at all or not really?
Night fishing. Yes or no?
I've tried and we've had some success, a lot of lost fish. Sometimes they just don't, and typically if we lose fish at night, it's typically on dirtier water. I feel like, everyone says go night fish clear types of lakes, but honestly they'll still eat on dirty lakes. They just don't eat it very well, but we haven't really a ton. It's not something I've dabbled with enough, because typically guiding, we're always during the day or taking clients during the day, and if I fish one night, it messes up my sleep schedule pretty bad. Honestly, that's like the one thing that happens. If I don't have maybe trips for a little while or something like that, and it's peak summer and we're now around a new or full moon, I'd probably do it more. I kind of would like to do it more, but not enough.
It's a tough racket running guide trips and then trying to go fish at night too, and then get up and go do it the next day. But Clayton, do you do much night fishing?
I don't do a whole lot either, and I think it's kind of based on the area that we guide out of. We get a lot of families, a lot of vacation families. They're up, and their time to play is during the day, and so they hire us for daytime trips. And when we just got to keep running those trips every day, that doesn't leave. I can't really run the night schedule too much when I'm running all the time during the day. If I think I'm going to have, a few days off or something, or it looks like my schedule leans out a little bit, which I'm not 100% full-time yet, so I do have some opportunities. I do enjoy fishing at night, and I try and do it a little bit more every year, but I can see that not happening if I continue guiding in my area, because of the type of people that we take out. It just doesn't really make sense. It's a little different probably than maybe Minnesota waters, where you get the hardcore anglers that are like, yep, we're, and that's the only time you can catch fish on some bodies of waters at night. Well, they bite at any time of the day. During the day, seems like there's always going to be a window where we're at, and somebody's going to have an opportunity during the day. So we don't really need to. I don't feel the need to fish at night and guide at night to catch fish.
Right on. So I got a question. So if you guys, hypothetically speaking, say you're coming back from a tournament, you've got generally basically a clean slate. You haven't been fishing, you haven't been on a specific bite. You're just taking a guide trip, say middle of summer, and you got 3 anglers in your boat. Obviously, you're going to fish in 1, 2, 3. What are you going to have as far as types of bait? Front person throwing, middle person, and then back person throwing.
Middle of summer. It kind of cuts right back to that one tournament bait I talked about, just like the double 8s. It's going to be a bucktail right out the front for sure. And honestly, if it's any sort of cloud cover, a little bit of rain coming in, probably flop the bucktail to the second and throw a prop topwater or a flaptail, like the little C4 from Bomb Squad. I like that little thing. And then out the back, it's the guy that's gonna be switching around. It's the third fisherman or typically me back there. It's ripping, pull pause something, and honestly, it's probably the last bait I threw at the tournament. Start
Right
there.
on. Clay?
Yeah, I'm going to, like, it's basically like Gus said, and the reason for it, you put your most productive bait up in the front, the one that has your best chance of hookup, and for me that would probably be a blade up in the front of the boat regardless. unless before the tournament I had a really good swim bait bite going on. Middle of summer, it really seems like I'll run 1-2 bucktail swim bait or flip flop the two based on how good of anglers people are and how, you know, and then vary like a shallow swimming dog to a deep one depending on, you know, how people can, you know, work the rod tip to keep the bait out of the weeds. And then, you know, like Gus said, the back person is going to be switching up a lot, but they're going to start off with like a mid-deusa or, you know, if they can throw a ninja tube or something, some sort of pull pause rubber bait out of the back, that's what's going to be third in line.
All right, awesome. Anybody have any more questions from the crowd here? Go ahead. Biggest pet peeve on a guide trip? Or biggest pet peeve on a guide trip?
When somebody throws a backlash and I'm talking to somebody else and they just reel it back up and then keep casting because they're embarrassed to let me know or, you know, or whatever, they don't even try and get it out. Or, you know, they sit there and quietly try and get it out in front of the boat and then I run over the line and suck it into the trolling motor and the rod goes into the water and, you know, bad things happen. That's a pet peeve.
Yeah, that's tough.
Sorry.
No, that'd probably be one of mine too. I don't know, that's a tough one on the spot. Probably, I don't know. I've noticed that, I don't know if people have seen that, but the sunscreen, the spray bottles, that gets your grafts pretty bad.
Yeah,
And I think I'm switching to, I'm going to be a little more strict on it, 100% lotion.
Yeah,
that
or you gotta tell them where to stand in the boat if they're
yeah,
gonna bust
that too.
out. Yeah,
Yeah.
it is.
Yeah, or forgetting to wipe their feet, or just having no care. I typically put a towel down, but yeah.
Yeah, for me on trolling trips, and it kills me. I give everybody, you guys are both troll with me the spiel when they start, and like the biggest thing when you're going to net a fish on Green Bay is just keeping that rod tip up, keeping pressure on it. And the worst thing a guy can do is try to peek over my shoulder. They want to look and see like this. And as you peek like this, the rod goes down. And that fish just slides back. I had a guy, great client, love the guy. If he listens to it, Mike, I love you, buddy. But he lost probably a high 40s fish because he's been fish with me for years. He's caught fish, but he peeked, he got greedy. And that fish, I just watched it slide back. He gave it a little bit of slack. And that fish just swam away ever so slowly and into our nightmares forever. So that's a pretty brutal one on the bay for us is when people try to peek. I tell them once we got in the net, you can look at it as long as you want, but don't peek. Any other questions? Go ahead. Will you help apply the lotion? That's a good question. Gus, let's start with you.
It depends on. I have no comments.
Everything's got a price. Everything's got a price.
I was gonna say something, but I probably shouldn't because we're being recorded. So.
You don't want to get canceled on YouTube.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to refrain from answering that one too.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Oh, look at the crowd, Steven. All right, everybody. I think we'll wrap it up on that one. Thanks, everybody, for coming to the great debate.
Thanks for sticking around.
Yeah, absolutely. Watch some Thistle Do Outdoors on YouTube, Muskies on Tap on YouTube, and podcast everywhere you can find it.
Thanks, Bill.
Thanks, Phil.
Yeah, absolutely.